The USO black box is real. Navy expert exposes secret base. The first clue wasn't speed. It was the opposite. In the deepest slice of the Atlantic, north of Puerto Rico, something stayed perfectly still, too still, while the ocean roared around it. A Navy sonar expert, cleared to handle passive hydrophone array logs, saw it first. An ultra-stable, phase-coherent signature holding position inside a subsea cable corridor. It didn't drift. It didn't wobble. It locked in, like a metronome buried in rock. We've all heard about 550-knot USOs vanishing into blue water. This wasn't a chase. This was an anchor, fixed, artificial, and right where fiber and power lines cross a strategic trench. The stakes weren't just mystery craft. They were surveillance, shipping, and sovereignty. And someone buried the evidence. What froze every stomach in that room? The signature didn't move because it didn't need to. It was the ocean that bent around it. To understand how we got there, we need to go back to the first ping that shouldn't have come back at all. The acoustic betrayal, the anomaly and the expert. Night shift means caffeine, red eyes, and the kind of quiet where a wrong tone feels like a slap. He'd done a decade on passive systems, trained to kill false positives before they waste anyone's time. Wind shear? Gone. Microseisms? Filtered. Shipping lanes? Modeled out. Volcano burps, cable strum, snapping shrimp. He knew their fingerprints. Around 023, the spectrum stabilized in a way that never happens in the Puerto Rico Trench. The baseline noise floor wasn't just calm, it was phase-locked across separated sensors. He froze, then checked timing drift, array health, and GPS sync. Everything held. He toggled through channels. The same carrier rose out of the chaos, ultra-stable, pinned, with sidebands that breathed like a living system. That wasn't geology. That was control. Stakes spike fast when you're sitting on a highway of cables. That corridor is where data and power ride the edge of abyssal depth, hugging a trench that falls past 8,000 meters. If something artificial is fixed there, it's not sightseeing. It's listening, shaping, or both. He ran it through the gauntlet. Vents? No. Vent signatures wander with flow and crackle with broad-spectrum hiss. Gas seeps? Erratic, broadband, pressure-coupled. Submarine plant? Machinery hum drifts, and boats don't sit unblinking on a trench wall. This thing's carrier didn't drift. Its sidebands adjusted like a servo loop tracking the room. He started writing while it was still on the screen. Carrier frequency, phase variance, intersensor coherence, sideband spread. Then he did what he'd trained everyone else to do. Try to kill it. He cross-correlated with environmental feeds, weather, seismic, traffic. Nothing lined up. He pulled historicals. Nothing like it. At 0307, the system ran a scheduled calibration sweep on a neighboring array. The moment that array energized, the trench signature cut. Not faded. Cut. When the sweep ended, it came back, same carrier, same coherence, like a studio light flicking on after a breaker reset. He wrote one word in the margin, schedules. He escalated with caution. An internal report went to a compartmented inbox. Usually a weird geologic like that gets bounced around with annotations, a few senior eyes, then a shrug. This time, access narrowed by sunrise. The file vanished from a shared stack and reappeared in a folder that wasn't there yesterday. He got a message: maintain observation, no external distribution. Repeatability is the enemy of excuses. Over the next nights, the anomaly kept time. On hours it held steady. During certain windowed events, it vanished. The intervals matched activity, not nature. He plotted appearance against maintenance notices for the corridor. The correlation made his shoulders tense. That was enough for a face-to-face. The briefing wasn't in the usual space. New clearance badges. Need to know printed at the bottom of the slide deck. A bathymetry tile appeared on the screen, except a square was fuzzed and stamped redacted. Someone called the anomaly the black box, like they were labeling a buoy. Nobody defined it. Nobody asked if it was foreign, domestic, or neither. The language shifted with the click of a laser pointer. Stop chasing fast movers, treat the fixed source as environmental background. Do not attempt classification. He stared at the fuzzed square. The redaction sat where his gut said the signature lived. He raised a hand, asked for a narrower filter pass. The answer was a smile and a line about competing priorities. Meanwhile, behind the smile, he heard what everyone else heard: control. He kept watching. The more he watched, the more the signature behaved like a system that understood when it was being watched. Coherence tightened right before scheduled patrol lanes crossed the corridor. The sidebands widened during known cable work. On the quietest nights, it dialed down to a whisper, but the carrier never lost its lock. That kind of phase stability across separated sensors meant one thing: feedback. Something was hearing the water, deciding, and pushing sound back in. He needed a test that wouldn't trip alarms. A low-power pulse, one channel, tucked under ambient. Nothing that would ping a sub. Just a tickle to see if the trench flinched. The room, when it came back, didn't breathe for a full second. The echo wasn't late, noisy, or smeared like rock. It returned with a clean phase shift that didn't match path length or seabed slope. It carried a subtle modulation he hadn't injected. Cooperative interference, like a hand tapping the same table to cancel the knock. He wrote, "Non-geologic echo, adaptive?" Then the cleanup started. His report moved through review and came back shorter. Attachments were gone, raw plots, timing notes, his cross-sensor phase traces. The echo delay in the sanitized version was shifted by 0.7 of a second. That edit pushed the return into a regime where a lazy reader could say multipath and move on. He wasn't a lazy reader. The original timing fit a system that was listening to him and pushing back with intent. He printed the raw, folded it under his notebook, and started backing up everything he could legally touch. If they were going to call this environmental, he'd hold the physics long enough to prove it wasn't. Unknown to him, across town, someone else had already used the phrase cooperative interference management in a document he hadn't seen. He wouldn't learn that for months. What he knew tonight was simpler. The trench wasn't just loud. It was listening back, and every time he tried to nail it down, it stepped just far enough to stay in shadow. He ran one more filter, narrowband, then bandstop, to see what vanished when he removed the carrier. Whole slices of the local soundscape fell silent, like a room with the air conditioner cut. When he stepped the filter off, the space filled again. That wasn't a natural source you can ignore. That was a hub. The next morning's guidance made it official. Focus on environmental baselines. No further active tests. Treat anomalous fixed returns as background features. He closed the email and stared at his monitor, the carrier line razor straight at the edge of the trench. The decision would matter because it told him something he wasn't supposed to hear. They didn't want the answer. He did, and he knew exactly where the search would go next. The hot zone briefing, corridor cables control. The room they used for environmentals had no windows and too much air conditioning. New faces at the back wall, badges without agency names. He signed the log, took a seat, and clocked the map before anyone spoke. The Puerto Rico Trench in false color, a serpent of blue-black cutting east, west, flanked by a spiderweb of cable lines hugging its rim. A colonel he'd never met called it a strategic corridor, deepest point in the Atlantic. Quiet water when you needed it, a natural sound shield when you didn't. Data and power crossing at predictable depths. Patrol lanes stacked above like highways in fog. The slide shifted and the web thickened. Transoceanic fiber, inter-island links, power feeds, all routed to avoid steep slopes but still grazing abyssal drop-offs. He'd worked near cables for years. He hadn't seen them presented like this, not infrastructure but targets. The language was careful. New clearance terms floated past, need to know, compartment continuity, eyes-only extracts. Then the bathymetry tile he wanted, north slope, steep gradient, a shoulder that could hold structure. Popped onto the screen with a square fuzzed to gray. Redacted, stamped across the middle. Someone near the door coughed when the pointer hovered over it and moved on as if nothing was missing. He waited for the part where they'd ask for characterization. Instead, the directive flipped the table. The fast movers that had burned the rumor mill for years, off the board. If it wasn't fixed, it wasn't mission relevant today. The fixed source he'd been tracking? Environmental. Treat it like a reef in the soundscape. Baseline it. Don't chase it. Don't name it. He raised a hand. He kept the tone flat. If it's environmental, it'll be indifferent. Could we run a low power confirm? The colonel smiled the way people smile when a meeting's already over. Competing priorities, he said. Keep within passive protocol. The words didn't match the eyes in the room. The eyes were measuring how much he'd push. Another slide. Risk to subsea infrastructure. A list of mitigation tasks that weren't called surveillance but might as well have been. Monitor for anomalous masking, log any ambient collapses along cable corridors, flag coherence events that persist through diurnal shifts. He felt the hook in the phrasing. If the trench went quiet at the wrong time, somebody's maintenance schedule got nervous. They called the fixed source the black box once, like it was a label pulled from a parts catalog. No definition. No origin. The phrase just landed and stayed there, heavy enough to carry, light enough to deny. He scribbled it in his notebook and underlined it twice. Meanwhile, something else was happening on the screen. The overlay toggled to show patrol lanes, surface and subsurface. Time to cross along the same corridor he'd mapped against the Anomalies' appearance windows. The coincidence wasn't a coincidence. He scanned for notes on deconfliction. Nothing. He scanned the faces. No one looked surprised. He leaned back and let the room talk. The cable density wasn't trivia. It was leverage. With enough sensors on enough strands, you could build a listening wall without ever planting a buoy. Add in the trench's acoustics, a natural waveguide when the water stratified right, and you could hide a lighthouse in a storm and call it fog. He thought about the night the signature cut the instant a neighboring array came alive. Schedules. The word sat there cold. If the black box was environmental, it had learned to read calendars. At the break, a young analyst poured coffee and didn't look at him when she said, quietly, that bathymetry tiles weren't usually redacted at that resolution. He asked what usually triggered it. She said contractor equities, then changed the subject. Contractor equities. The kind of term you use when something exists on paper, but not on a map. Back in seats, the directive hardened. No active tests without written authorization. No cross-program data pulls. Observations go to a new inbox. He opened his mouth to ask who owned the inbox and shut it again. Ownership wasn't the point. Control was. He took one more pass at clarity. If we're calling a fixed coherent carrier environmental, what environmental model are we using? A pause. A shrug toward a senior civilian who recited a line about long-term baseline establishment and the importance of not perturbing complex systems. He knew that line. He'd used it to wave away curiosity that didn't matter. It mattered now. They clicked to a last slide, a red band along the trench-labeled hot zone corridor. The guidance was to treat it like a weather front. Log it, avoid flying kites in it, and never pretend it wasn't there. He felt a heat at the base of his neck that wasn't the room. If you declare the thing you can't explain to be the weather, you can control the pilots without admitting you've built the storm. He left with a thicker badge and a thinner set of options. In the hallway, he wrote 4 words under the date: corridor, cables, control, silence. Then he added a 5th, circled it, and tucked the notebook away. Test. The controlled ping, sanitized echo. He planned it like a locksmith testing a door. One whisper of energy, buried under ambient, aimed off-axis so it wouldn't light up anybody's dashboards. He picked a lull between patrol passes, checked the tide tables, verified the thermocline profile, and set the pulse to ride just beneath the trench's natural hum. If the black box was weather, the ocean would shrug. If it wasn't, it would answer. He hit send and watched the waterfall. The first second was ordinary, scattered returns, a smear along the slope, the faint comb of distant ship screws. Then a return stood up cleaner than it had any right to be. Not a bounce, not a smear. A neat slice with a precise phase rotation that didn't match range. He ran the path length math in his head. Not enough time for a seabed hop, too clean for a wall blur, too regular for an eddy. It was like someone caught his tick and handed back a tuned version. The room went hand-to-throat quiet. He stepped through frequencies. The return carried a modulation he hadn't transmitted, a subtle sideband tremor that tracked his own pulse spacing, as if the water had learned his rhythm. He adjusted the spacing. The sidebands shifted with him. Not perfectly, not like a mirror, more like a system sampling, adapting, then deciding what to push back. He wrote 2 words, cooperative interference. He ran the usual killers. Vents don't phase rotate to match injected chirps. Gas plumes don't hold coherence across widely separated sensors. Machinery hums drift with load and shaft speed, and no subparks mid-corridor to play ping-pong at 3 in the morning. He pulled historicals from comparable nights. Nothing. He cross-checked sensor health, GPS locks, clock drift, cable tension alarms. Everything was tight. He wrapped the test inside a standard environmental note, buried the specifics and attachments, raw waveforms, intersensor cross-correlations, timing deltas, the exact phase rotation he measured on the first clean return. He tagged the report for eyes that knew what phase-coherent means in bad water. Then he waited. When it came back, it had lost weight. The executive summary was intact. The guts were gone. No raw plots, no correlation traces, no timing sheets. His 7-digit timestamp tied to the first clean return had slid by 0.7 seconds. It looked trivial until you ran the geometry. That shift made the echo compatible with a shallow multipath, just enough for a tired reviewer to nod at the word environmental and move on. He stared at the line and felt the heat rise. He'd measured the return against 2 clocks, one on the array, one independent. He'd confirmed the GPS sync to within microseconds. The original delay demanded an active agent, something listening, computing, and pushing sound back with intent. The edited delay, let a committee call it a rock. He printed his own version, dated it, and slipped it into the folder he never kept in the same place twice. Meanwhile, he noticed a different kind of silence. The internal chatter that usually swirls around an oddball dataset. Suggestions, barbs, jokes, went dead. The inbox created for environmentals started accepting his uploads and offering nothing in return. The only feedback was a form note, received. He remembered the redacted bathymetry tile and the offhand term at the coffee urn, contractor equities, and understood why the room hadn't breathed when the echo stood up. They'd already decided where it lived. He tried a second tickle, even quieter, staggered against a tide shift to rule out phase tricks from moving layers. Same behavior. The return arrived with a phase rotation inconsistent with path length, and the sidebands carried a faint wobble keyed to his altered spacing. He pulled in a colleague under a pretext. Help me sanity check a filter artifact. The colleague stared, frowned, asked where the pulse came from, then shut down. Log it, he said flat. Don't interpret. He started running subtraction experiments. Remove the carrier with a narrow notch. The room changed. Ambient hiss thinned. Distant traffic lost a shimmer, like someone had taken the varnish off. Put the carrier back in. The varnish returned. That's not geology, that's a mask. He plotted the effect across the sensor field. The coherence pattern looked like a dome thrown over a patch of water, edges feathered, center hard. He sent a final note, careful and boring. Observation of persistent coherent return with anomalous phase rotation. Recommend controlled replication with independent timing. The answer wasn't a reply. It was a change in his access log. Audit flags. A meeting request with no subject line. A reminder about passive-only protocol and the importance of non-perturbative baselining in complex environments. He heard the message under the message. Stop poking the thing that answers. Treat it like weather. He closed the email, looked at the razor-straight carrier, and decided to move his questions where edits couldn't reach. If the official echo was going to be sanitized, he'd have to build a case that couldn't be wiped by shifting a timestamp. That meant duplication, corroboration, and a map that matched the hum. Building the case, quiet outreach and patterns. He started with the only safe move left. Call someone who used to carry the same weight, but no longer owed anyone a report. A retired acoustic analyst picked up on the second ring. He didn't sell drama. He sent plots, carrier stability, sideband drift against his pulse spacing, cross-sensor coherence maps with the dome shape faint but visible. The analyst didn't talk for a while. When he did, his voice had the dry edge of someone who's seen too many environmentals that weren't. He said the modulation looked engineered. Not energetic geology, not cable strum, not industrial. You're hearing control, he said. If you can't publish, at least duplicate. Duplication needed time, and time needed leverage. He dug through SOSUS-era summaries, declassified abstracts, edge case footnotes from the 199s where the Atlantic got strange near Puerto Rico. Buried in a scan of a monthly anomaly roll-up was a phrase that caught under his fingernail. Non-geologic echo, flagged and shelved. The entry listed an internal reference code, nothing more. It was enough to prove the trench had sung this note before. Somebody heard it, wrote it down, then put it where attention goes to die. You know what that means, repeatability with no curiosity, the surest sign of something managed. While he hunted old paper, the present kept handing him tells. He mapped the carrier's on-off windows against published cable maintenance notices and saw the slope of a pattern. Activity spiked when crews were scheduled to touch glass and steel. During maintenance, the dome broadened. After it tightened, on random weekends at odd hours, the trench went eerily clean. Ambient collapsed across his sensors for minutes at a time, like the ocean had been told to hold its breath. He overlaid shipping movements. The collapse windows didn't match busy lanes. They matched calendars. He duplicated raw logs to an external archive within the rules, timestamp transfers, independent checksums, all documented. He wasn't hiding data. He was making sure it existed in more than one place. He met an old friend in a parking lot anyway, handed over a sealed drive, and said only that it contained environmental baselines worth keeping. The friend didn't ask. They both knew asking was the trap. The more he looked, the more the signature's behavior read like an operator's plan. Right before patrol lanes stacked over the corridor, coherence tightened. Right after, it relaxed. Sidebands widened during known work windows, then narrowed to a whisper. He tried to break it with environmentals, storm noise, microseisms, seasonal stratification, but the patterns rode above the weather like a schedule rides above a week. He kept outreach quiet and specific, no talk of trenches or bases, just physics. He sent anonymized modulation plots to a university lab that specialized in adaptive array processing. The grad student who wrote back had questions about sensor spacing and phase stability. He sent numbers, not locations. The student's reply was blunt. To maintain that coherence across the distances implied by your plot, you need feedback and power. If it's geology, the student wrote, it's the first volcano with a control loop. He broadened the circle by an inch. A contact from an oceanographic institute with a long memory mentioned a research ship's odd log line from the late 1990s. Phantom bathymetry off Puerto Rico that self-corrected on a later pass. Maps don't self-correct. People correct maps. He added the line to his board and drew a thin arrow to the SOSUS note. 2 decades apart, same neighborhood, same habit of making inconvenient returns disappear. Meanwhile, he watched his access logs get noisier, audits, new flags, the feeling of being watched. He altered his routine. Late nights became earlier nights. He stopped carrying his notebook into rooms where questions were measured by the centimeter. His backups multiplied. He wrote a simple rule at the top of the week, no single point of failure. Then a fisherman's radio call drifted into his file. A cluster of boats reported a dead ocean patch, fish sounders blanking, nets drifting quiet, near the corridor. He didn't go to them. He went to the logs and found a matching ambient collapse. 14 minutes. Then the hum returned, low and stabilized, like someone had switched back on. He didn't know it yet, but a second witness with a uniform would soon give that collapse a name. He ran one more pattern test. He took a week of raw and inverted the schedule, looked for what happened when nothing should. The carrier flickered on during a no traffic, no maintenance window, held for 6 minutes, then cut. No external trigger, no weather driver, no seismic noise. It looked like a drill, a practice run. He wrote it down in plain language, system test window unannounced. He sent a last quiet email to the retiree. Modulation looks engineered, patterns match maintenance, collapses match anecdote. The reply came back with coordinates he hadn't asked for and a story he hadn't expected. A blackout patrol, a sector where the ocean went dead, and a hum that sounded exactly like his echo. He closed the laptop, looked at the redacted square in his head, and felt the map start to take shape. Witness 2, the blackout patrol. He didn't send coordinates in the first email. He sent a time, 0142 Zulu. Then a sentence, you'll see the hole. The second witness was a submarine sonar operator who'd spent enough nights in dark water to know when the ocean's lying. They met off base, no uniforms, a voice that stayed level even when the details didn't. He described a routine patrol sliding along the eastern lip of the trench, thermals layered, noise floor messy but manageable. Then the room went strange. The ambient spectrum didn't dip, it fell through the floor. No hiss, no plankton crackle, no farship comb. The waterfall turned into a blue desert. It lasted 14 minutes by the clock. They called it Dead Ocean on the stack because gallows humor helps when your tools go blank. At minute 3, someone asked to light active, just a pulse to make sure the world still existed. The order came back tight, negative. Maintain passive. He said the denial wasn't unusual. Command doesn't like surprises, but the tone was different. Like someone already knew what active would prod. He watched the timer and the blank slate until a presence bled back in. Not the usual messy return of life. A stabilized low-frequency hum stood up under the floor, soft at first, then firm, like a generator coming online behind a wall. He drew the shape in the air without meaning to, the hum's edges feathered, the center hard. It matched the dome I'd been mapping without the word dome leaving my mouth. He said weapons posture stayed unchanged, speed steady, course unaltered. The only thing that shifted was everybody's breathing. When the hum settled, the ocean didn't snap back to normal. It returned in a way that felt managed. Narrow bands first, then the rest, as if a curtain opened a hand at a time. Debrief tried to flatten it. The phrase on the sheet was environmental dampening event, for words built to end a conversation. He laughed once when he said it, Not because it was funny, but because it was lazy. Logs were minimized by directive, raw audio summarized, pages cut, language softened. He filed his own notes anyway. Months later, he'd realized someone else had rewritten them for him. I asked him for anything clock-stamped that I could overlay. He stared long enough to make me think the talk was over, then slid over a copy of his own retention. A 1-minute segment of passive spectrum before the drop, the last 30 seconds of the void, and 3 minutes of the hum's return. He didn't say where he got it. He knew I wouldn't ask. I took it home and lined it up against my collapses. 14 minutes. We both had 14. The onset curve matched. More important, the hum's modulation, the faint, regular wobble in its spine, was the same tremor I'd chased through my sanitized echo. You don't get two independent datasets with identical low-frequency modulation by accident. You get that when the source is one thing wearing two moods. I asked what else the patrol saw. He shook his head. No lights, no bioluminescent glitter, no thermal oddities anyone would sign for. Just absence, then that hum, then a careful return to messy life. But he dropped one detail that hit me like a pin on a map. They'd been ordered to pause all active diagnostics on onboard systems for the duration of the blackout, not just sonar. He'd never seen that. If your ship thinks it's sick, you check vitals. Unless the doctor's standing behind you telling you not to. He'd tried to push higher. He got the same smiles I'd gotten, the same language about not perturbing complex environments. He'd also gotten an extra line I hadn't heard yet. Non-attribution partnership. No name. No agency. Just an assurance that if something unusual unfolded, appropriate stakeholders were engaged. He didn't know who appropriate meant. He knew it didn't mean him. I asked why he'd reached out to me at all. He said the modulation. He'd seen enough scribbles from enough boats to know when a weird lines up with another weird. My dome, his hum. My collapsed windows, his dead ocean. He'd also heard about a maintenance barge that lost depth records for a night along the corridor. The insurance paperwork used the phrase sensor spoofing, like it was a one-off. He didn't buy one-offs. We lasted an hour. He kept coming back to the silence. Not the oceans, the institutions. The way the event had been named to death. The way logs had been collapsed to fit a title. He said it felt like walking into a church and finding the pews gone, but the sermon still playing. Before we stood, he put his finger on the map I didn't show. He traced an arc where the trench shoulder softened, then tapped the place my redacted tile would have lived. He didn't need to say coordinates. The hum had already done it. 2 datasets, 1 source. If the ocean went dead there, the map would show where. And if the map had a seam, we were about to pull it. Geometric evidence, the map they weren't supposed to see. The second, witness didn't give me a grid. He gave me a shape. So I went looking for a map that could hold it. Public bathymetry is a patchwork. Ships pass, sonars paint, and mosaics get stitched over years. If there's a seam, it shows up in the metadata long before it shows up to the eye. I pulled the tiles for the trench shoulder where his finger had hovered and let the time stamps tell on themselves. At first pass, the terrain looked right. Jagged ridges like broken teeth, avalanche scars, the long slope down into blue-black. Then a panel in the mosaic went smooth, too smooth, like someone had taken a plane to rough wood. It wasn't flat. Nature is never flat at that scale, but the texture lacked the randomness you expect. On the edge of that smoothness, a shallow depression traced an arc with edges that didn't follow the local strata. The ridges ran southwest. This thing held a bearing that didn't care about geology. I flipped the info pane and checked the tile lineage. A composite over years, as expected. But one square carried a capture window out of step with its neighbors. Recent by months, not years. Exactly where the briefing slide had gone gray. When I toggled hillshade, the depression's outline sharpened into something that didn't want to be noticed. A broad, shallow basin with shoulders softened like berms and a long axis that lined up closer to true north than the ridge lines around it. To test myself, I turned off the map and looked at text. Coordinates, vessel IDs, sonar models, swath widths. The odd tile listed a platform that usually worked commercial corridors, not deep science, and its pass count was thin, like a token scan to fill a hole. The metadata carried a note about post-processing filter harmonization. Normal words that, together, often mean smoothing. Smoothing hides noise. Smoothing also hides edges. If you're going to lay a functional structure on an irregular seabed, you either carve the seabed or you build to ignore it. Ignoring it means alignment to a reference the ocean doesn't provide. True north, not the tilt of the local rocks. I laid a bearing over the depression's long axis. It hugged north within a sliver. The surrounding terrain didn't care about north. It followed the slow violence of tectonics. Orientation like that doesn't happen by accident in a place that rough. While that was happening on screen, the cables crept in. I overlaid the subsea routes, the fat lines of transoceanic fiber, the thinner inter-island links. A major line ran along the depression's edge like a path following a fence. Not crossing, not draped across the middle, but tracing the lip, where maintenance vessels could work without courting disaster. I checked historical route charts. The line had nudged over time, small shifts, as if someone wanted it near without admitting why. Alignment is one thing, function is another. If the trench hum was a dome in my sensors and a presence in a submarine's room, the ground plan should fit a system that throws a controlled acoustic field. Geometry matters if you're managing destructive interference. Edges define phase, surfaces define coherence. A smooth basin gives you a predictable boundary. Soft shoulders let you feather the field. A north-aligned long axis gives you a stable reference to hold against drift when your sensors live on different clocks. I measured the basin's scale against my array. The width from lip to lip matched, within tolerance, the coherence footprint I'd mapped during collapse windows. The length matched the elongation I'd seen when the dome stretched during maintenance. My numbers had lived in water. Now they sat on rock. It would have been enough to suspect clever mapping. But the composite dates kept nagging. The time-shifted square, the one with the smooth panel, sat under the briefing redaction I couldn't stop seeing. The procurement paper I hadn't found, yet didn't exist for me then. All I had was a seam in a mosaic and a depression that refused to grow teeth like everything else around it. I tried the natural arguments on myself. Slump scars can look clean if they're young. Sediment pools even where ridges bite. Gravity doesn't care about my hunches. Then I pulled a parallel trench section 50 miles east, similar slopes, similar currents, similar geology, and laid its texture next to my basin. The difference wasn't subtle. The control sample was chaotic in the right ways. My basin looked like a landscaper had been through. Across town, a cartographer I trusted agreed to look without context. I sent him tiles and timestamps, no trench, no witnesses, no hum. He wrote back that the smoothing looked algorithmic, not natural, and that the orientation was peculiar for that terrain. He added something I hadn't considered. The basin's rim carried microterraces at regular intervals, shelflets that could hold hardware or at least suggest staging. Natural terraces happen, but not at intervals that march. I pulled the cable overlay back on top and checked each terrace against known maintenance spurs, small deviations where vessels dropped gear. 2 lined up. 1 didn't. The 3rd sat where no public route claimed a reason to be. I wrote the word stub and drew a question mark. What nobody knew at the time was how important that stub would become when a contractor invoice used a phrase I'd only heard whispered. For now, the map was enough to push the case forward. A geometric depression smoothed against jagged terrain, time-shifted metadata exactly under a redaction, a cable hugging its edge, and an orientation that answered to north, not the earth beneath it. If the ocean had a dome that could make a submarine's world go silent, this was where you'd anchor the ribs. If you wanted to listen to fiber and manage what water carried past, this was where you'd sit. The trench had given me a voice and a rhythm. The map gave me a body. Impossible physics, practical function, the hub hypothesis. The numbers forced a leap most people avoid. If the carrier stayed razor straight through bad water and the sidebands moved with me, then something down there wasn't just radiating. It was measuring, deciding, and acting. Phase stability, like that in a trench full of turbulence, points to active cancellation with feedback. Passive geology doesn't hold lock across separated sensors while it flexes its own edges. A loop was running. Sense the field, compute the error, inject the correction. And my tickles kept showing up inside its math. Think of it like noise-canceling headphones, except the ocean is the cabin and the headphones are the size of a neighborhood. You don't just blast sound and hope. You place sensors to read the pressure field. You run a controller fast enough to predict the wave front. And you push back with just the right phase so peaks meet troughs and vanish. In air, inches matter. In water, wavelengths stretch, reflections pile up, and time delays ruin sloppy code. If the dome I mapped was real, it was a field shaped by intent. The energy budget killed the natural options. Hydrothermal vents breathe heat and hiss. Their acoustic output is messy, amplitude-driven, and obedient to flow. Gas seeps burp and wander with pressure. Even a plant's machinery hum drifts with load. None of that lines up with a carrier that doesn't move in sidebands that shadow my spacing. But an engineered system with distributed emitters could keep a carrier on rails while it trims the local chaos, tightening when traffic approaches, slackening when the water's empty, and broadening when fiber crews go hands-on. I built a working model, ugly at first, that fit the behaviors. A fixed acoustic hub seated on that smooth basin, ringed with vector hydrophones and low-frequency projectors. The hub listens to the ambient field, to the cable's own micro-vibrations, and to any injected probes it decides to notice. A controller computes a solution, where to null, where to mask, where to feather, and the projectors paint a managed soundscape. The result isn't silence everywhere. It's control where it counts, a dome of plausible ocean that can be emptied, thickened, or tinted to taste. Under that model, my phase rotations make sense. When I nudged with a buried pulse, the controller sampled, bled off a tiny fraction to estimate my intent, and returned a phase-rotated slice tuned to land where my sensors would see cooperation, not chaos. It didn't mirror me, it compensated me. The sideband tremor keyed to my spacing falls out of a simple predictor. Estimate repetition, pre-cancel the next tap, show me what it wants me to think is path length. The 0.7-second correction in the sanitized report wasn't a rounding error. It was a human hand moving the story back into geologic comfort. Functions stacked quickly once I let the hub exist on paper. First, sea lane surveillance. Distributed receivers on the rim can pull bearings on anything noisy and weak alike, fusing lines of bearing into tracks that never touch a mast. Second, cable monitoring. Clamp sensors at those micro-terraces, read fiber-borne vibrations the way research teams now do with distributed acoustic sensing, and you've got a tripwire running along the basin's edge. Any tamper, any cut, any anchor drag shows up as a signature the controller can tag and log. Third, masking and injection. If you own the local pressure field, you can make sectors go dead for minutes, my collapses, and then lift the curtain in bands that soothe nervous crews. You can also paint decoys, slow drifts that look like geology, fast flickers that look like dolphins, even ghost ships if you're willing to be rude. Research ships calling phantom bathymetry that self-corrected fit that toolbox. LiDAR doesn't care about sound, depth sounders do. Spoof them, and maps fix themselves when you tell them to. Fourth, ingress and egress shielding for whatever rides the rumor mill as USOs. If a craft wants to vanish into the trench without leaving a wake in sonar histories, it doesn't need to outrun anyone. It needs a harbor, a managed acoustic cavity where the water hears what it's told. A field that can null narrowbands, mask broadband hiss, and inject false multipath can make a bay inside the ocean. Not to hide forever. To slip, stage, and leave when the dome widens. The north alignment of the basin's long axis started to matter in a way I hadn't expected. Controllers hate drift between clocks. If your rim sensors share a reference tied to true north and stable time, star fixes upstairs, fiber timing downstairs, you can hold phase across long apertures. That buys you sharp nulls and clean edges. The terraces at regular intervals become mount points for emitters with known baselines. Swap a unit, recalibrate in a night, keep the field tight. Maintenance windows, in that light, aren't just for fiber. They're for the dome's ribs. I tested the model against my worst nights. Storms that made microseisms crawl up the band still showed the carrier straight and the dome edge where it should be. That's a controller refusing to be knocked off lock, not a vent whistling through weather. On glassy nights, when the sound channel deepens, the dome elongated along the basin's long axis. That's a geometry-dependent field breathing with physics, not a happy coincidence. Skepticism helps. I tried to break the hub with alternatives. Large carbonate platform resonance doesn't explain adaptive sidebands. Cable station bleed? Fiber repeaters don't phase rotate to match injected ticks across miles. Multiple small sources adding up. Uncoordinated emitters smear coherence. They don't tighten it on cue. Every route led back to the same door. Coordinated sensing and emission in a feedback loop designed to manage what the ocean sounds like in a place the map pretends is empty. One ugly question sat alone: power. The trench isn't gentle, and low-frequency projectors aren't thrifty. But if you hug fiber and power corridors, you don't have to haul batteries. You tap what already moves along the rim, electrical feeds for repeaters, maybe a dedicated pair that never shows on a public chart, and buffer with seabed storage. A hub that listens most of the time and only paints hard fields when needed fits the energy trace I saw. Collapse windows short, maintenance broadening temporary, hum stabilized then gone. When I finally wrote the model clean, listen, mask, inject, spoof, I felt the relief that comes when a scattered pile of behaviors clicks into a single tool. Not a weapon in the cinematic sense. A manager. A harbor you can't see, but you can feel if you know where to stand. It didn't prove itself yet, models never do. It needed a receipt with a name on it, and a phrase I'd only heard near a coffee urn. That receipt was sitting in a file someone forgot to bury deep enough. The paper trail, the one file they couldn't bury. It didn't arrive with a whistleblower flourish. It showed up as a misfiled attachment in a routine procurement crawl. Line items with codes that usually mean buoys, brackets, bolts. Buried halfway down was the phrase that yanked me upright. Vector hydrophone array retrofit. Sector, listed by a grid that mapped straight onto the smooth basin's lip. Not a buy for new hardware. A retrofit, taking something that exists and making it better. The vendor wasn't the usual oceanographic supplier. The corporate shell traced through 2 layers of LLCs to a defense contractor with a habit of building things that don't want to be seen. The scope line read like engineering speak until it didn't. Integration of rim-mounted vector elements. Phase reference rebaselining. Cooperative interference management per guidance. I stared at the last 4 words until they stopped being words and turned into a room I'd already sat in. Cooperative interference management. The coffee urn phrase. Not rumor. A deliverable. Dates matter when people try to hide. The invoice was stamped received on a Tuesday I knew too well. 36 hours after my neighboring array's calibration sweep clipped the trench signature off like a light. The work window in the document's annex ran the same week my dome elongated during cable maintenance. I pulled my log and checked the carrier's behavior. It had gone razor still, then broad, then quiet. The retrofit date sat like a tack through all 3. Attachments listed install points labeled by innocuous nicknames, ledge, tooth, shelf, exactly where my microterraces marched around the basin. Each point carried a note about cable proximity caution and the need to verify fiber integrity before anchoring. A tiny line in the margin marked a north anchor reset to bring the phase reference back within spec. North again, always north. The geometry wasn't an accident, it was a requirement. There was more, the kind of more that sounds boring until it hits the wrong ear. A shipping log with crate weights too heavy for mere sensors. A power draw estimate tagged as temporary surge allowance routed through a maintenance service pair on the corridor. Maintenance pairs don't exist on public maps. They live on engineering diagrams and invoices like this one, where someone had to write down the path before they could bill for it. I ran the surge number through my dome's behavior. It matched the push during the 14-minute collapses. Enough juice to throw a blanket, then fold it. What nobody knew at the time was that an email thread sat 2 clicks away. A project manager wrote to a liaison whose title didn't print under any agency seal. Expect periodic null zones per guidance during recalibration windows. Notify patrol deconfliction as required. The reply was 1 line, acknowledged. Non-attribution protocols remain in effect. Non-attribution. The same phrase the submarine operator had heard. Here it was policy, not rumor. I followed the thread down to a risk assessment. The contractor had flagged sensor spoofing risk for civilian depth gear operating near the rim during high-gain tests. Mitigation. Pre-notify commercial partners via generic notices to mariners. Attribute anomalies to environmental variability. In other words, if a research ship called Phantom Bathymetry, the script was already written. Environment did it. Move along. The most telling piece wasn't technical. It was a calendar note. Field team shift to night schedule, then back to days, exactly bracketing my unannounced 6-minute test window. No traffic, no maintenance, just a quick on and off like a heartbeat check. When I'd written system test window in my notebook, I hadn't known anyone else had written it too. They had. They just buried it where only accountants and project managers look. I sent anonymized snippets to the retiree. The 4 words that mattered, the date, the null zone warning, without names, logos, or grids. The reply came fast for a man who usually took hours. This is the first time I've seen that phrase in print. Don't sit on it. I didn't intend to, but I had to be sure it wasn't a plant, a lure to make me step where the floor gives. So I checked the vendor history. 2 years earlier, the same shell had won a small contract to assist an environmental baseline establishment for a different trench segment, language that now read like camouflage. The deliverables then included a phase-coherent study and a masking profile library. If you're building headphones for the ocean, you need a library of what to cancel. They'd been collecting recipes. One email in the chain hit harder than it should have. A senior official wrote to a distribution list with 3 blacked-out names. Do not characterize fixed returns in the corridor. Treat as environmental. Expect follow-on guidance post-retrofit. It was the briefing room line, typed into existence. If anyone asked why the ocean went dead, the answer was weather. I printed the key pages, left the logos off, and laid them next to my maps and hums. Vector hydrophones on those terraces. A north anchor reset on that axis. Power surges that matched my collapses. Null zones per guidance that lined up with a submarine crew holding their breath. Cooperative interference management, not as an idea, but as a contracted service. The receipt didn't say who owned the harbor. It did something sharper. It proved the harbor was a project with milestones, outages, and a schedule pinned to a wall. If they could retrofit it, someone had built it first. If they could warn fleets to expect nulls, someone had the authority to tell fleets what to expect and what not to ask. The physics had finally met a signature with a signature. And if management was real, it meant command. The next question wasn't if. It was who. The truth and the cost, the 1990s spike. To understand who could own a harbor like this, we needed the first time the water behaved like it was under orders. The trail kept bending back to the late 1990s, when the Atlantic near Puerto Rico started acting like it had secrets. SOSUS summaries from that period, thin where they should have been thick, carried a strange pulse. Activity spikes, then sudden quiet, then tracks that got to the trench and stopped as if the ocean ended at a cliff. Get this, when I lined up the SOSUS anomaly roll-ups with ship logs, a pattern surfaced. Research vessels working bathymetry along the north slope recorded phantom depth returns, false shallows, abrupt steps, features that looked like sandbars at 6,000 meters. On second passes, the phantom vanished. Notes read self-corrected, like the sea had fixed its own map. Maps don't fix themselves. Someone tells the next pass what not to see. That's the kind of detail viewers repeat to friends. Meanwhile, insurance paperwork told a quieter truth. A maintenance barge filed a claim. Depth gear failed to log for a night on the corridor's edge. The phrasing was sterile, sensor spoofing suspected, but the context wasn't. The barge wasn't in rough water. It was in the lane where the cable hugs the trench shoulder. They paid out, shrugged environmental variability, and moved on. Moved far enough back, though, and that night lands in the middle of a cluster where SOSUS flagged fast movers that simply blinked out near the same coordinates. Those fast movers are the stories that built a decade of mess room lore, objects tearing along at impossible speeds, then diving and vanishing. If that's all you chase, you miss the other half. In the late 1990s, the sensor world around Puerto Rico changes. Reports of non-geologic echoes start to pepper internal notes. Some get shelved with vague tags. Others die on the page. The earliest clean description of the trench echo, the phase-coherent return that shouldn't exist, starts appearing in this spike window. Capacity doesn't show up overnight. It's tested, tuned, and then it gets bold. What nobody knew at the time was how the same years were changing the map quietly. Commercial cable routes began to proliferate, and the corridor along the trench's rim grew dense. That density isn't just economics, it's an opportunity. If you're building an acoustic manager, you want reference clocks, power taps, and excuses for ships to loiter. The late 1990s give you all three: new fiber, new maintenance, and a cover story that sounds like modernization. I called a SOSUS veteran who'd served during that spike. He wouldn't give stories, but he'd give shapes. He described tracks that came in clean across long baselines, then flattened as they approached the trench. Flattened, not slowed. Bearing lines stopped resolving like every receiver lost contrast at once. It felt like range gating in air, he said, except nobody logged the gate. He swore he wasn't talking USOs. He was talking the water. While that was happening in deep channels, academia brushed against the same edge. A draft paper from the era, withdrawn before review, documented anomalous coherence in ambient fields north of Puerto Rico during maintenance-heavy months. The reviewer note that killed it was short: instrumental confound likely. Maybe. Or maybe someone recognized the signature and decided science didn't need that footprint in print. The draft's figures I found in a personal archive matched the hum's modulation I'd later pull from a submarine's night. Pair this with SOSUS's partial declassification in 1992, and you get the perfect cover. More data in public, less appetite to name what doesn't fit. Context shifts the cost. Inside the spike, you start to see behavior that matches a system learning its range. Short ambient collapses, then longer ones. Spoof bathymetry on one line, then on two. Cable maintenance concentrated in windows that align with null events. If you've ever tuned an array in bad water, you know the first months are ugly. The field overshoots, undershoots, then stabilizes. The 90s look like a controller going from theory to practice. But the institution adapts as fast as the field. After the spike, you see the language harden. Environmental dampening becomes the preferred label. Baseline establishment becomes the shield. Patrols get standing guidance to maintain passive. Academic datasets from that box of ocean develop gaps. FOIA returns from later requests come back fat with pages and skinny with words, the thickness telling you how long someone's been watching. I kept asking, who can pull this off? The receipts I found point to contractor hands, but the authority to null a sector of ocean and tell fleets to accept it isn't corporate. It's policy with teeth. The late 90s gave more than fiber and power. They gave a legal environment where layered jurisdictions around Puerto Rico could smudge ownership, territorial, federal, allied, enough to let a non-attribution partnership live without a clean logo. There's a human cost in this neat arc. The veteran told me about watchstanders who learned to stop flagging trench weirdness because flags went nowhere. A researcher who shelved a promising coherence anomaly and switched fields. A barge crew that watched their depth vanish and got told the ocean hiccuped. When a system matures, it doesn't just manage sound. It manages people by instructing them through policy and habit to call control weather. By the end of that decade, the trench stops being a place where strange things happen and becomes a place where nothing happens on record. That's the tell. Natural chaos leaves trails. Managed silence leaves patterns. The spike was the training montage nobody saw. The aftermath was the program settling into routine. Which is why, when the offer came to the expert, transfer, raise, praise with a warning, he knew exactly what it meant. Welcome to the partnership, or learn to live outside it. He chose the second. The harbor didn't care. It was already open for business. The secret meeting, the offer and the threat. The summons didn't look like a summons. Calendar ping, unmarked conference room, 10 minutes on the invite. He walked in and found 3 people who knew his name a little too well. One wore a uniform without insignia pins. One wore a suit with no agency on the badge. The third was the kind of contractor who knows the coffee is already cold. They didn't open with accusations. They opened with gratitude. They'd reviewed his environmental discipline, appreciated his methodical approach, and wanted to align his skills with higher impact priorities. Translation: you've been useful, and we want you closer. The offer on paper was clean. Transfer to a program with better pay, broader remit, and access to datasets he'd never see otherwise. No named office, just a title fat enough to feel like a raise. The uniform sketched the outline. Non-attribution partnership, cross-domain. He wouldn't have to sign away his soul, just agree that products flowed through appropriate channels. He'd get the tools he kept asking for: independent timing, calibration windows he could schedule, a chance to shape doctrine. The contractor slid a folder across: relocation stipend, clearance uplift, start date in 30 days. He didn't touch it. He asked what non-attribution meant in practice. The suit's answer was practiced. Interagency collaboration where outcomes matter more than logos. Accountability diffused so no single office was a target when decisions get hard. He asked who decided when a sector of ocean went dead. The uniform smiled. Guidance, he said. We follow guidance. They pivoted to praise. He'd found a complex environmental manager. Others had misread. He'd maintained integrity under pressure. They needed people like him inside, because outside mistakes get made. He heard the unvoiced sentence: join or you'll be the mistake. The tone softened but the edges sharpened. The suit mentioned recent audit flags on his account and framed them as routine integrity checks. The contractor noted his enthusiasm for duplication and said proper archiving would eliminate unnecessary redundancy. He asked if unnecessary meant independent. The contractor didn't blink. They dropped a small carrot that looked like a key. If he accepted, he'd get access to full-resolution bathymetry, raw cable vibration telemetry, and pre-briefs for null windows so he could optimize analysis. He asked whether optimization included permission to publish physics. The room took a breath. "We don't publish operations," the suit said. "We publish science with operational sensitivities removed." He countered with the phrase that had marked his week: cooperative interference management. The uniform didn't flinch. "You understand the concept," he said. "Understanding it inside protects people." Then the warning slid in like a knife laid flat. Curiosity outside creates risk. Risk jeopardizes equities. Equities include lives, platforms, and strategic relationships. He didn't need a glossary. He asked the question that mattered to him more than the offer: who owns the harbor? The answer was a shrug without humor. "We all do," the suit said. "Together." He tried another angle. "Is it domestic, allied, or something that doesn't fit categories?" The uniform's eyes held him a second longer than comfortable. "It works," he said. "That's the category." They let the silence sit, then refreshed the pitch. This was a fork. He could keep logging environmentals into a black inbox, or he could help steer how they're managed. He could go home with a folder full of money and a role that finally matched his skill, or he could keep drawing domes on napkins and hoping someone didn't clean his desk. He felt the heat at his collar, then the cool of decision. He said he wouldn't sign without a named chain of accountability and clear publication lanes for physics that didn't disclose operations. He asked for the ability to preserve raw timing data outside edited summaries. He wanted a statement on the record that environmental dampening events would be logged as managed, not natural. The suit closed the folder. The contractor leaned back. The uniform nodded once, as if he'd rehearsed both outcomes. "You're principled," he said. "We respect that." Then he set the hook they'd saved for last. "Careers are long. Memories are longer. We hope you'll reconsider." He stood to leave. The suit added a final line, neutral and heavy. "Be careful where you route your questions," she said. "You don't always know what you're stepping on." Praise with a warning. Offer with a threat. He walked out lighter by a salary and heavier by intent. He went home and started a different job. He compiled a dossier built from multiple sources: maps, modulation plots, witness timelines, invoices with phrases that didn't belong in procurement. He split it into parts, sealed each, and lodged copies with custodians who didn't know each other. Not to leak, to survive. If pressure came, releases would clock out on their own. In the morning, his badge still opened doors. His inbox still accepted files, but the air around him changed. Conversations ended when he approached. Meetings moved without him. His access card logged anomalies he didn't cause. The offer hadn't vanished. It had inverted. They'd praised his integrity. Now they'd test its cost. Cross-checks, fleets, academia, FOIA. He needed proof that didn't wear a uniform. The fishing fleets gave it to him first. Word travels on VHF the way truth travels in small towns, fast, crooked, and hard to silence. Crews working north of the trench started comparing notes. Sonar plots that went flat like dead batteries, fish sounders that turned into blank blue rectangles, echo sounders that reported sky under the keel. One captain marked the spot on his GPS as bad luck. Another called it the quiet patch. He didn't ask them for theories. He asked for times, for lined up within minutes of blackout windows in his logs. He overlaid vessel tracks against his dome map. The same arc kept catching them, the basin's rim where the cable hugs the slope. Their instruments didn't die everywhere, they died in a curve. A deckhand with 30 years at sea said the patch felt wrong, like the ocean had gone to sleep. When it woke, he swore the sounder returned in steps, not a flood. Steps, narrow bands first, then the rest. The same managed rise his submarine witness described, told now with calluses and diesel on the air. He sent anonymized time series to a marine electronics tech who services half the fleet. The tech saw no shared hardware fault. Different brands, different firmware, same failure mode. He mentioned a recurring service call note crews wrote in margins. Returns suppressed, environmental? The question mark was doing all the work. While he was collecting fishermen's minutes, academia stumbled into the field again. An ocean acoustics preprint appeared online for 20 hours, then vanished. It wasn't about Puerto Rico. It was about anomalous ambient coherence in a western Atlantic corridor during maintenance months. The figures, briefly cached, showed coherence spikes that shouldn't live in messy water. A colleague at the lab sent him the PDF before the link died. Reviewer feedback, when it returned, carried a familiar phrase: anomalous coherence inconsistent with environmental variability. The authors withdrew. The grad student who'd helped him earlier wrote one line: someone called them. He went looking for older ghosts. A 2000s-era thesis draft from a coastal university, never defended, modeled low-frequency masking in trench-adjacent waveguides. Its bibliography cited an industry workshop on cooperative interference mitigation, hosted by a cable consortium. He couldn't find the workshop proceedings. He found the agenda cached on a mirror: risk to subsea infrastructure, mitigation strategies, stakeholder session with unnamed defense observers. The room where science meets policy always leaves a smudge. He filed FOIA requests with narrow scopes, calibration logs for the neighboring array on the night his carrier cut, internal memos using the phrase environmental dampening event, procurement correspondence containing cooperative interference management, patrol deconfliction notices mentioning null zones. He expected redactions. He didn't expect the heft. Months later, thick envelopes arrived, black bars on black bars, cover letters polite to a fault. Page counts told the story the text refused to carry. Hundreds of pages, sustained over years, all saying nothing in ink and everything in weight. One response returned empty, but for a page count and a line, no responsive records releasable. The count was 47. He knew 47 meant there were records. He also knew someone had decided their release would break a promise. He cataloged every cover letter, date-stamped every denial, logged the agencies that claimed no custody. The absences lined up like fence posts around a field no one wanted named. Personal risk rose as his circle widened. His access card blinked red on doors he'd used for a decade, then green after a long pause. An audit flag popped on his workstation. Unauthorized duplication, false, but entered. He found a compliance officer waiting at his desk with a checklist about media handling. The questions were gentle. The subtext wasn't. He answered cleanly and wrote afterward, pressure test. Unknown to them, across town, a cable maintenance manager complained to a confidant that someone kept requesting odd-hour windows for environmental baselining along the trench rim. The manager didn't know about domes. He knew about overtime and hazard pay. He told his crews to take the hours and keep the radios on. During one of those windows, a recreational sonar forum lit up with screen captures, sudden flatlines, then striped returns. Replies said firmware glitch. The posters said the water glitched. That contrast, official shrug, public goosebumps, supercharges shareability. He bundled the fleet's times, the lab's withdrawn figures, the FOIA page counts, the forum screenshots, and his own collapses. He wasn't proving a base. He was proving management. The dome's fingerprint appeared on trawlers, on laptops, in blacked-out letters, and on doors that paused too long. When a system is real, it doesn't just touch sensors. It shapes routines. It trains people to avoid questions and teaches machines to return the answers it wants. Going public, verification and replication. He didn't dump files on a forum. He routed them through a lawyer who'd handled national security whistle cases, walked in with a drive, and set 2 rules: methods protected, identities masked. The lawyer built wrappers, affidavits that described datasets without naming platforms, chain of custody logs that would stand up to a hostile read, and a clean index. Sanitized echo, dome maps, procurement excerpts, blackout audio. Nothing sensational. Everything testable. Then he went hunting for hands that could replicate physics without the trench. A university acoustics lab with a good tank and better ethics agreed to blind tests. He sent anonymous waveforms, his injected tick, the return's phase rotation, the sideband wobble keyed to spacing, and asked one question: can a feedback controller produce this without cheating? 3 weeks later, the lab's grad team sent a clip of a tank ringed with cheap projectors and borrowed hydrophones. They injected a whisper, ran a fast controller, and turned back a slice with the same anomalous rotation and the same subtle sideband tremor when they mimicked his pulse schedule. Their note was careful: replication of dynamics in controlled setting, behavior consistent with adaptive cooperative interference. Meanwhile, a geophysicist who'd never worked the trench took the bathymetry mosaic cold. No trench, no story, just tiles, timestamps, and a brief. She ran surface roughness stats across the suspect square and the controls. The square flagged high for algorithmic smoothing, low for natural variability, and its long axis held within a hair of true north. Her line stayed in the lane, non-natural orientation in an otherwise stochastic field, likely anthropogenic modification or post-processing consistent with concealment. He needed one more independent voice on the cable alignment. A retired route planner, now consulting, overlaid historical corridors, and pointed out the quiet engineering. The nudges that keep maintenance feasible while hugging a boundary. You keep your toe on the edge, he said, if you're servicing something you don't name. He circled the terraces he'd identified and called them work ledges. Not proof. Practice. He bundled the lab replication, the geophysicist's orientation stats, the planner's overlay, and the contractor phrase he still couldn't believe had made it into an invoice. He added a legal memo that explained what the package wasn't. Not classified source disclosure, not operational details, not coordinates. What it was, a methods paper in disguise, with independent verifications that any university could repeat in their own water or tank. He sent the bundle to 3 outlets at once. One science journal that tolerates provocation. One investigative newsroom with lawyers who don't blink. One professional society conference that lives on peer challenges. The journal asked for reviewer time. The newsroom asked for corroboration on the procurement chain. The conference asked for an author willing to stand on stage. He said yes to 2 and no to the 3rd. He'd take questions in writing. He wouldn't walk into a camera. While that was happening, a Navy contact he respected called from a number he didn't recognize. No greetings. Just, you don't know what you're stepping on. Not shouted. Not dramatic. Measured, like someone trying to keep a friend from wandering into a machine room. He asked if the program was still live. The silence was answer enough. The contact said one more thing. Your physics is sound. Your guesses about ownership will get people hurt. Then the line went dead. He adjusted. He stripped conjecture. He let the evidence talk. Phase-locked carrier that returns with adaptive rotation. Lab replication of the control dynamics. Independent confirmation of non-natural geometry and north alignment. A cable map that behaves like it's serving a rim. A paper trail that uses cooperative interference management and warns fleets to expect null zones. He wrote a plain sentence that lawyers liked. These observations are consistent with a fixed acoustic management system operating in the Puerto Rico Trench. Then he did something small that mattered. He published the tank controller code open source, scrubbed of any trench-specific parameters, with a note inviting replication. Within a week, a European lab forked it and reported the same sideband behavior when they varied pulse spacing. A West Coast team ran it in a fjord and got partial matches, enough to argue the physics traveled. The story stopped being his and started being a problem the field could poke without clearing a badge. The newsroom piece landed next, carefully sourced, every claim pinned to a document or a lab. The headline wasn't a shout. It asked whether we'd built a harbor in the deep. The last line quoted his only on-record sentence. It wasn't a ship. It was the harbor. The inbox that had said received for months finally sent something else. A cease and desist threat that named nothing and implied everything. He forwarded it to his lawyer and went back to the work. Why the Puerto Rico Trench? Function meets geography. Here's where motive stops sounding like theory and starts sounding like logistics. The trench isn't just deep, it's the deepest point in the Atlantic. Brownson Deep sits down past 8,300 meters, a vertical wall of cold water that eats sound differently than the open sea. If you're going to sculpt an acoustic field, you want a place where physics already bends the waveguide in your favor. The trench gives you that for free. Its position turns physics into strategy. North of Puerto Rico sits the main highway for transatlantic cables, fat trunks and feeder lines tracing the shelf before they break for depth. Those routes concentrate right where that smooth basin lives. If you need power, timing, or excuses for slow ships to hang around, a cable corridor gives you all three. It's not a coincidence that the basin's rim kisses a major line. That's how you keep a system alive without building a city to service it. Then there's the sound channel. In this part of the Atlantic, the deep sound channel hugs low, and the layers stack predictable on quiet nights. That buys you two things: long reach for low-frequency control and sharp boundaries to press a dome against. You don't have to fight the whole ocean. You ride the channel like a rail. When the thermocline settles, your controller can cut clean edges and feather them where the physics is already thin. Traffic turns the trench into a choke point. Submarines use that shoulder like a highway on-ramp, thermals above, cold dark below, patrol lanes slicing east-west. You don't need to track every boat on the Atlantic if you own the spot where lanes tighten. The dome doesn't have to be big to be decisive. A controlled cavity a few kilometers across can force every platform through a patch of ocean that answers to you, not to them. You asked why the hum sits there and not somewhere empty. Because empty doesn't let you listen. The basin's rim lets you lean on fiber like a stethoscope. Distributed acoustic sensing is public in the science world now. Turn a cable into 1,000 ears by reading backscatter in the glass. If you integrate those ears with a rim of vector hydrophones, you get cross-domain awareness. What the water says and what the cable feels fused. That's not surveillance for surveillance's sake. That's a tripwire that watches for tamper, intrusion, or a craft using the corridor as cover. Politics seals the choice. Puerto Rico sits inside layered jurisdictions, territorial waters, federal influence, allied coordination, where you can move a program between shells and keep names off paper. Call it a non-attribution partnership, and nobody has to wear the logo. If a null zone spooks a fleet, the notice to mariners says environmental. If a research team catches coherent spikes, a reviewer calls it instrument error. You're close enough to US command to deconflict patrols. You're far enough from the mainland to keep the footprint off front pages. The trench's geology offers another quiet advantage: stability in the reference frame. That long axis aligned to true north isn't just a flourish. In a basin where the seabed isn't creeping like a subduction zone on fire, you can hold baselines across seasons. Phase references don't wander with shifting sand. Recalibrate after a retrofit, anchor north, and your controller wakes up in the morning knowing where its edges are. Maintenance windows shrink. Outages look like weather. Critics will ask why not the Mariana or the Tonga. The answer lives in cables and custody. The Pacific has depth, yes, but not the same density of Western fiber, not the same layered cover of U.S. territorial reach and Atlantic shipping. The Puerto Rico Trench sits at the crossroads of power supply, timing discipline, and legal fog. If your job is to manage what enters and leaves the acoustic record, you pick the crossroad, not the cul-de-sac. There's one more angle. USO lore obsesses over speed, craft that cross horizons like darts. The trench hypothesis replaces speed with shelter. If a platform can slip into a cavity that edits the water, it doesn't need to outrun a destroyer. It needs a minute of managed silence and a map that self-corrects behind it. Geography makes the minute possible. Function turns it into policy. Call it a harbor because that's what it is. A shaped field tucked into a place the ocean already respects, fed by the infrastructure we built, protected by jurisdictions we layered, and used by programs that prefer verbs over names. The expert's last move, the harbor. He stopped trying to win the argument in rooms he didn't control and started making sure the argument couldn't be erased. The dossier became a living thing: modulation plots, blackout audio, bathymetry seams, the invoice with the phrase that wouldn't go away, each section mirrored in 3 places. One set lived offline with a lawyer. One lived on a cold drive in a bank box registered under a trust with no name attached to his. The third he split like a seed bank. Sealed packets lodged with colleagues who only knew they were holding environmental work that mattered. He wrote letters to future readers. Each packet carried a short note explaining only what they'd need if a release triggered. Publish the tank replication, post the geostat analysis, share the null zone language. He didn't say trench. He didn't say base. He wrote harbor once, then crossed it out, then wrote it back in. Pressure ticked up. His workstation flagged a policy violation he hadn't committed, then cleared itself. His badge lost 2 zones and gained one he didn't want. A monitoring notice arrived about unapproved media movement he could disprove with his own logs. He stopped driving the same way home. He brought his notebook inside only when he wrote with the blinds closed. He told no one everything. Then he wrote the sentence he wanted on record, the one that didn't accuse and didn't kneel. It wasn't a ship. It was the harbor. He put it on the first page of the dossier, set it in plain type, and let it carry the weight of a decade of strange nights. The line reframed the phenomenon without naming a platform. It named a function. It implied ownership without pointing at a flag. He built timing into his insurance. If he lost access for more than 48 hours, Packet 1 would post the lab's controller code and the blind replication video. If his email bounced for a week, Packet 2 would publish the geophysicist's orientation stats and the cable overlay. If his license cleared and then revoked on the same day, Packet 3 would drop the procurement excerpts with the dates circled. He wasn't threatening to leak. He was promising continuity if continuity got priced out of the building. He kept one concession to the field. He invited 3 university teams to replicate the tank dynamics and the geometry analysis with their own tools, offered to pay shipping on loaner transducers, and asked for nothing but a public result. agree or disagree, with methods attached. He didn't give coordinates. He didn't need to. If the physics was real, it would show up anywhere a controller and a patient graduate student shared a room. Career endings rarely come with speeches. His came with a transfer to a desk with nothing on it, and a performance plan that measured tasks he wasn't meant to finish. He signed the exit papers without argument, handed in a badge that had stopped being a key a while back, and walked out past the same security desk where he'd once checked in at midnight with coffee and a plan to catch the sea misbehaving. He didn't say goodbye. He'd already left. At home, he printed one more page and put it at the back of the dossier. Methods sufficient for independent replication are enclosed. Identities are withheld. Programs change, physics doesn't. If the work matters, someone else can do it in daylight. He sealed the last envelope and slid it into a drawer that would open if the wrong pressure landed on his door. He accepted the cost early. The calls slowed. The conferences stopped. The inbox learned new ways to be quiet. But the data survived, and the model wasn't just a model anymore. It had been tested, echoed, mapped, and named. When the newsroom called to confirm the final quote, he gave 5 words and hung up. He'd already told the story. The harbor would tell the rest. If the trench holds a black box, it isn't visiting. It's managing the ocean, editing what reaches our ears and what history records as real. If you want the maintenance window deep dive and the cable overlays, subscribe now. Then drop a comment with the one dataset you want released first, the sanitized echo, the mosaic metadata, or the contractor NDA. Your choice decides what drops next.